In this video, we're going to be covering 5 advanced B2B marketing strategies that I can almost guarantee you haven't come across before. And if used correctly, your future self and your pipeline is going to thank you for watching this video. When most people talk about marketing strategies, they talk about things like SEO, Google Ads, podcasts, LinkedIn, community, yada, yada. But unfortunately, those things are, well, just tactics. And hey, I'm not having a go here because I'm one of those people who's done this before. I mean, it's an easy way to get views, but unfortunately, it oversimplifies something that is a lot more complex. Strategy doesn't just involve tactics. It goes way deeper and looks at finding the best audiences to target, your best messaging, your positioning, consumer psychology, as well as the marketing tactics that you should be implementing. And today we're going to run through strategies that address each one of the above using data we've collected and tests we've run over the past 7 years. Now, before we get into it, my name's Ben and I've worked with over 100 B2B marketing brands and consulted on a lot more. We manage millions of pounds of ad spend each month for our clients and built our performance B2B marketing agency to a level where it was acquired last year. I also wear B2B hats and have LinkedIn socks, just so you know I'm serious. So let's dive into the first strategy, which is called the fresh start effect. My lifelong mission has been to see if there is a certain type of person who is more likely to buy than someone else. And well, I think I may have found it. Now, let me explain. All buying decisions are driven by emotion. There's literally been studies on people with brain damage, and that as soon as you take emotion away, logic alone is not enough to drive you to make good decisions. Now, while emotion may be easy to implement in B2B with impulse purchases and small buying value, in B2B, we're not always in a position or even in industries when we can drum up enough emotion for users to sum up the energy to want to buy themselves, let alone convince other people and put their reputation on the line. So rather than trying to create emotion all the time by relying on brands and other heuristics, we should look to capitalize on something called the fresh start effect. So what exactly does that mean? Over the years, I've started to notice a pattern that many of the people who reached out to us or reached out to our clients had one big thing in common. A lot of them had just started a big work-life event, like a new job or a new promotion or something else. Now, for years, I shrugged this off as, well, hey, they probably have more access to budget now. And that was really the last I thought about it. And while there is some truth to this, I didn't realize how deep it went. I then came across a 2014 study outlining something called the fresh start effect. And this study found that people, when they have a big life event like a new job, they stop focusing so much on the day-to-day in that period of time and start to reassess the big picture. Or how this study eloquently puts it, temporal landmarks may create discontinuities in time perceptions that make people feel disconnected from their past imperfections. They can also disrupt people's focus on day-to-day minutiae, therefore promoting a big picture view of life. In short, this psychological phenomenon is the everyday equivalent of the New Year's resolution. But instead of new year, new me, it's new job, new supplier. Not quite as catchy. Now, you know how powerful that motivation is on Jan the 1st when you buy all that gym gear and you're craving that first 10 kg bench press. This emotional situation is just what you need to get you into the habit of doing something that you know you should have been doing through logic years ago. Now, this is how people feel in big work-life events, and it resets their motivation for change, and it also adjusts their short-term risk appetite, which is good for suppliers and providers to these people. Now, while it's not quite as extreme as someone starts a job and makes a decision, they actually shouldn't do that. We do typically see that within the first 3 to 6 month mark is when people typically look to get in contact. Okay, that's great and all, but how can we actually use this as part of our strategy? There's many ways, but a few of the ways you can do this would be using it as part of, say, your LinkedIn ad strategy. You can target people who have literally just changed their job. There's a native option, or you can go and use the likes of Clay, for example, to find this. You can target companies that are growing like 20% plus year on year because they're more likely to need it. You can also go on the likes of Crunchbase for big milestones like funding rounds and acquisitions, because these are other big work events which people are going to be motivated to go and take action. But it's your job to go and find exactly what that may be. For an IT service company, they may be looking at people that have just moved offices, for example, because that's obviously going to be something that prompts them to make a big decision because they've changed space. And there are other ways you can do this. I want to go into the second targeting strategy, which is be the alternative brand. Now, just like the above, I started to notice some trends where our best clients seem to be coming from. When I started out my journey, I assumed that the majority of businesses would come from brands that didn't already have a marketing agency. But I quickly found out this couldn't have been further from the truth. Same with our clients. Their biggest customers came from brands that already had a similar solution in place. And I didn't really understand why this was until I read the book Thinking Fast and Slow. This book categorizes thinking into two areas: thinking fast and, thinking slow. But the fast thinking is where we have readily available information ready to go, and the slow is where we have to exert effort using our prefrontal cortex into problem solving. And unsurprisingly, the fast thinking is where we spend the majority of our time. And this is where the power of brand comes in. Because if I said to you, go and choose a CRM provider, by default, people would automatically think HubSpot or Salesforce without having to think too hard. This is your brain's search engine from the fast thinking. So it becomes very hard in actual search engines to compete with people that have already used Google in their brain to find one of the big brands out there. That said, the opportunity really lies when people stop thinking fast and start thinking slow. And this usually happens when the person or the potential buyer decides their current solution isn't fit for purpose. Now let's look at a real life example that we went through when buying software. A few years ago, we were looking for a project management software for our agency. We started off by using Monday.com, mainly because I couldn't go on YouTube without seeing one of their ads. You probably know one of the ones. After using it, we quickly decided that it wasn't for us and we migrated to Asana, mainly without too much slow thinking because, again, we kind of outsourced that thinking to other people's opinions and I'd heard good things about them, or it was just an availability bias that I saw and heard about them everywhere. So it's just the first thing that sort of came to mind. After about a year of using Asana, we started to think slowly as we found out that it wasn't the best fit for us. You couldn't do things like log your time, and we needed a separate app for that. And there was a few other things that didn't really quite work with our use case, and the time was adding up over the team. So we then became back in market to buy a new solution. But this time we approached the buying decision in a much more slow thinking, prefrontal cortexy kind of way compared to the first times around, where we just kind of used our mental search engine and chose a supplier without much research. And we ended up with a company called Productive.io. Now, I'd never heard of these guys before finding them in Google, but I didn't care that much because they had the exact features that we needed that Asana lacked for managing our agency process. Now, I never would have gone for Productive the first time round, as at that point, I didn't know what I didn't know about Asana and Monday. But once we had trialed Monday and Asana and had a more concrete use case, we cared less about brand and more about functionality. Sure, in performance marketing, if you target people with an existing supplier, pro tip, if you've previously won clients from this brand, it's a good hint that you guys are a good alternative for the slow thinking brain. You can cut through the noise and actually market to people who you have a chance of winning, because the reality is a lot of these casual buyers are going to go with one of the monopolies or oligopolies in the market, unless you work in a very verticalized space and have a great marketing go-to-market function. So how can you go and quickly put this into practice? Now, there's a few different ways. Again, just a few. You can go on the likes of Built With, which will show you a list of all the companies who are using, for example, your competitor software. You can look at subdomains and go and target from an ABM list. You can also, one of my favorite ones in search engines, would be doing XYZ competitor alternative. And the thing I like about this, and I think that's how we found Productive. We looked at Asana alternative for agencies, and Productive came up, and it was a really good way of us getting introduced to their brand. And I'd say in expensive B2B spaces, XYZ competitor alternative is a really good way to acquire new clients, because not only is that person product aware, they're product aware who are already using a product, who are then looking to use a different product. So there couldn't be anyone more at the bottom of the funnel than these people, because they already understand what they're looking for and they've got the budget and they're looking to switch. So it's definitely a good approach from a search engine marketing perspective as well as an ABM perspective. Right, quick hat change and moving on to the third strategy, which is something I like to call the stepping stone offer. And let me tell you a quick story. A few years ago, when we moved offices, we were looking for a new managed service provider. Quick nod to the fresh start effect there. We literally just wanted a company we could call up if one of our team's computers decided that they didn't want to start that day for one reason or another. So, as per usual, we typed in IT service provider near me into Google and shortlisted a few companies. And we pretty much just ended up going with the company that was the quickest to respond, because I subconsciously decided that they'd probably have the best support, which was a big, obviously, bonus for us. There's definitely a strategy in that somewhere in itself, but different video. Point is, I went looking for something specific, which was IT support or like an IT help desk. But when I came off the call, not only did I agree to IT support, I'd also agreed to let them manage our internet, Microsoft licenses, antivirus, cybersecurity, and a whole host of other things related to IT support. In the past, I've actually Googled things looking for people to support with like antivirus and cybersecurity, and I've been managing our own Microsoft licenses and business internet through BT. And I never would have actually thought about getting in contact with a managed service provider for these services, strangely, because mainly I was never really aware that that's something they did. And when I Googled it, there was so much competition. Over the years, and even since then, we've audited loads of IT service and MSP accounts of different shapes and sizes, and they've all looked the same. And let me just throw up a word cloud here, which we call MSP bingo. And you can see here they're bidding on everything from, very common terms like digital transformation through to public cloud, business internet, cybersecurity, as well as terms like IT services and, location-based co-location, for example. But the problem is with a lot of these terms like business internet, if you're bidding on, even if you supply that, you're competing with the likes of BT. And cybersecurity, you might do it, but you're competing with the likes of the biggest self-service companies in the world. And if you might do public cloud services, but you're competing with people like Dropbox and iCloud, and the intent isn't very clear. And that's the problem we see a lot with companies, is they know what services they offer, but they don't know which ones they should be focusing on and ones that have the most clarity and intent they should be putting the majority of their effort behind. Now, instead of bidding on all of those products, they should just be looking to be more strategic and find something called their stepping stone offer. And this stepping stone offer is simply the product or service the prospect is most likely to buy from you first, thus the stepping stone in your business. These are the things in this MSP example that we circled that people would most likely buy when looking to work with a standard managed service provider. Now, if you're not sure what your stepping stone offer is, you can always just check your CRM and see what product is that most people bought first, or the one more usefully probably for you guys would be to work out the one that someone inquired about the most to start with anyway. And then you can scale up, because people are more typically product aware that your types of companies offer that versus the ones they may not be aware there's a product you guys offer, or they may not even be aware there's a product for the solution they're trying to solve in the first place. So the motto of the story is, once you found your stepping stone offer, you can then get as many people as you possibly can through the door with that stepping stone offer and try and cross-sell them on the other products that kind of fit in that wheelhouse, which are going to be relevant for them too. And you're not competing on all fronts. I think there's that saying, 2 hands in the bush is more than 1 in the hand. Ignore me. Let's move on to strategy 4. And strategy 4 is using creative as targeting. Now, this prompted me the other day when I saw an ad like this. And it made me think that there are a lot of cases in B2B where we can't accurately target ideal customer. There's not audiences on LinkedIn. It's a bit blurry how we're going to target them on search. With Meta, it's sort of like a lot of automated and tested bidding. So what do we do when we can't target the people precisely? And going back to that image quickly, and I realized it's not actually B2B, but the fact I saw ROI, it grabbed me in and then it tried to sell me cereal. I'm pretty sure it's not that good example, because, people who work in accounting can probably still eat that cereal. I imagine nothing bad will happen. But a good example of this in the B2B space would be that we started speaking with a client, and before we started working with them, they accidentally had global targeting turned on and targeting in all different industries. And they weren't targeting the financial service industry with their ad. They actually ended up getting a lead from Payoneer in the financial service space in a different country for what they were targeting, all by mistake. And it kind of prompted me to think that's super interesting, because we spend so much time focusing on who exactly we want to target and everything else that sometimes we forget about being creative with the messaging. So I challenge you to do one thing. When launching your next campaign, loosen up the targeting parameters slightly and try and use the creative to do the heavy lifting rather than just brute force impressions in front of an audience you know exactly who you're going to see from an ABM list with average creative. Cast your net wider and try and be more specific with creative, and you'll be surprised with the audience it cut throughs and creates. You know, in a world where targeting is going to become more and more automatic, especially in the lights of Meta, creative is soon going to be pretty much the only differentiator. And the more we can cut through and use terminology, words, and sort of stuff that cuts through the noise for a specific ideal customer persona, we're really going to be able to cut through the noise and really reduce the acquisition costs without actually spending so much time on trying to make sure we only get seen by the right people at the right companies. And this fifth strategy is super important, and that is just don't follow the trends. In the past week, I've spoken with an investment banking software that has been having ridiculously good success with blog posts, even though blog posts are dead because of AI. We've been speaking to API consultants who have got loads of leads coming from ChatGPT, even though ChatGPT, apparently doesn't have that much of the search volume compared to Google. And we've had IT service providers speak to us who's having unreal success with outbound email. And that's kind of the problem, is we go through things and phases and cycles of people telling us what is hot and what's not as a channel, what's dead as a channel. And fortunately, really, it's really down to your strategy, your product, your market, and actually what medium and channels you prefer as well. And if you guys want to go through a half an hour video where I pull out loads of real businesses and different industries, all with different value propositions, and show how you can tie that in to a marketing strategy, I've created a whole video on that, which you can go here, which I think you may find super useful. But until then, guys, any questions, whack them in the comments. And I hope you have a great week and speak to you next time.